Lewis Parnell.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr President, all of us should have the right to live our lives free from violence and free from the threat or fear of violence. And most of us take that for granted. But sadly, that is not the reality for many people in our community. And it's particularly not the reality for many women in our community. All of us, Mr President, have heard terrible stories in relation to domestic violence. We've heard of the situations that women have found themselves in. We've heard about violence. We've heard about manipulation, emotional abuse. It is something that is now out of the shadows and it's in the public consciousness. I think the awarding of the Australian of the Year to someone like Rosie Batty has helped bring it to the forefront of public thinking. Also, thinking about domestic violence, I note that our kids at school these days have a far more enlightened education than their grandparents did. They're taught self-respect, they're encouraged to be resilient, and most importantly, they're taught respect for others. That's not to say those values were non-existent in their grandparents' time, but I think the emphasis now is far more on children learning what it means to be in a society, what it means to be a citizen. Like many of us, Mr President, over the years I've attended many events, commemorations, seminars, demonstrations, church services, public meetings and workshops on the scourge of domestic violence. But in spite of all of that talk, in spite of all of the progress that we know we are making, the statistics around domestic violence and the death of women at the hands of intimate partners remain truly shocking. It's now generally accepted that on average 1 woman per week is killed in Australia at the hands of a current or former domestic partner. Now, a number of people have commented that if this was the death toll from terrorism in Australia, then we would have seen a much more urgent response. If 1 person per week was bashed or shot or knifed or run down by a terrorist, then all of the power and the resources of the state would have been applied to address the situation, and it would have been regarded as a national crisis. And I think that's a point well made. Most domestic violence occurs behind closed doors, so whilst the violence, deaths and the injury are not publicly visible, we do know, though, that the toll is far greater. Domestic violence is a national crisis, and our collective response has been lacking. However, as appalling as the statistic around domestic violent deaths might be, we know it's only the tip of the iceberg. Surveys from a range of credible sources reveal that around 1 in 3 women have experienced at least 1 incident of violence from a current or former partner since the age of 15. Between 2014 and 2015, 2,800 women were hospitalised after being assaulted by a spouse or partner. And between 2014 and 2016, there were 250,000 domestic violence incidents that were reported and recorded. However, the Bureau of Statistics data reveals that 80% of women and even more, 95% of men who had experienced violence from a current partner never contacted the police. So when you put those two things together, Mr President, then the real statistics for domestic violence victims in Australia are in the millions. The most common reasons cited for not reporting incidents to the police are fear of revenge or further violence from the current partner. Now, Mr President, there are many more statistics, but the bottom line is that the response must include the whole community, and that means Parliament as well. Parliament is in a particular position of authority in being able to pass laws that help keep people safe and that appropriately punish those who breach community standards. This bill seeks to clarify the type of behaviour that is unacceptable, and it imposes appropriate punishment for offenders. The bill specifically focuses on acts of choking and strangulation because these are some of the most common assaults, particularly against women, and also because they are a clear precursor to further violence, including acts that result in death. Other aspects of the bill cover the admissibility of evidence in prosecutions and also expanding the range of relationships that are covered by domestic violence offences. Importantly, Not only are a wider range of family relationships covered, such as siblings and grandparents, but also recognition is given to particular Aboriginal kinship relationships. Mr Acting President, the Greens are pleased to support the second reading of this bill, which represents an important legislative advance which now needs to be backed up by the injection of more resources into the wide range of services and programs that help keep women safe and support them when they fall victim to domestic violence. Now, that means better housing services. It means better health services, particularly mental health. And on top of the criminal sanctions, we also need much more attention paid to the rehabilitation of the perpetrators of domestic violence, to help them understand the unacceptable nature of their behaviour and to equip them with skills to better manage their anger and other inappropriate behaviours. And again, the health services have a key role to play in relation to mental health, as well as drug and alcohol services. Mr Acting President, I look forward to the swift passage of this bill and to the introduction of further measures that help reduce the scourge of domestic violence.